Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Historian, a quiet corner of the night where the past drifts back gently without knocking, and where old lives return not as lectures but as soft stories meant for rest. Tonight, you're not here to memorize dates or chase grand conclusions. You're here to wander, to listen, to let history unfold at a pace slow enough that your breathing can follow along. If you enjoy these calm journeys into forgotten worlds, you're always welcome to like this video or subscribe, only if it feels right for you. And if you wish, you can tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. It's a quiet comfort to know how many places and how many evenings gather together here. Tonight, we're drifting into the entire history of the Silk Road, not as a straight line on a map, but as something far more human. Because despite its name, the Silk Road was never really a single road, and it certainly wasn't paved with silk. It was a loose, breathing network of paths, pauses, markets, stories, mistakes, and small hopes, stretching across centuries and continents, carried mostly by ordinary people who never imagined they were part of something so large. You won't be racing across deserts tonight. You won't be conquering empires. Instead, you'll be stepping quietly into mornings and evenings, into caravan yards and city gates, into places where people waited, traded, prayed, complained about the weather, and wondered what lay beyond the horizon, much like you do now, just before sleep. So dim the lights if you can. Let the room grow still. And when you're ready, let's take our first slow step onto a road that never really slept, even when history did. You begin in the east, not with a dramatic sunrise over endless dunes, but with something far quieter, the steady, practiced movement of hands. Silk does not announce itself loudly. It begins as a thread, almost shy, drawn from cocoons in workshops where the air smells faintly of warm water and patience. You stand nearby, watching as fabric forms slowly, strand by strand, long before anyone ever imagines it crossing mountains or borders. This is Han China, more than 2,000 years ago, and silk here is not merely cloth. It is control. It is prestige. It is paperwork. The imperial court understands this well, which is why silk production is guarded carefully, regulated, taxed, and recorded by officials whose brushes move just as steadily as the weaver's hands. You can almost hear the soft scrape of ink on bamboo slips, listing bolts of silk not as fashion, but as assets, gifts for diplomacy, payments for loyalty, tools of influence wrapped in beauty. Outside the workshops, the empire stretches westward, not out of curiosity alone, but necessity. The Han dynasty wants allies. It wants horses strong enough to carry soldiers. It wants information about lands beyond its borders. And so messengers are sent, cautiously at first, following river valleys and known paths, stopping often, turning back when routes feel too thin, too uncertain. This is how the Silk Road truly begins, not as a confident stride into the unknown, but as a series of careful questions asked of the land. You pass through a border town where silk is counted again, sealed again, guarded again. Here, soldiers stand watch more out of habit than excitement, their days filled with dust, routine, and the quiet suspicion that nothing interesting will happen today. They are mostly right. Most days on the Silk Road are not dramatic, they are administrative. They involve waiting. They involve checking bundles, repairing sandals, and listening to rumors that may or may not be true. A small vignette unfolds nearby. A clerk, barely older than the brush he carries, double-checks a ledger as twilight approaches. He has ink on his fingers and silk fibers clinging faintly to his sleeves. He is not thinking about history. He's thinking about finishing his work before dark, about dinner, about whether the road will be quiet tonight. This is how great systems survive, through people who never think of themselves as part of one. As silk leaves these eastern edges, it does not travel far at first. It is exchanged in stages, handed from one group to another, each transfer shrinking the distance between worlds without ever completing the journey. No one here plans to go all the way to Rome. In fact, most people along this route have never heard of Rome at all. The Silk Road functions because it does not demand ambition. It only asks that each person move something slightly farther than before. Along the way, silk begins to change meaning. In its place of origin, it is tied to authority and ritual. Beyond the borders, it becomes curiosity, luxury, a whisper of something distant and refined. It passes through hands that cannot read the language of its makers, but understand its value instinctively. Cloth has always been good at crossing boundaries that words cannot. You follow the silk westward until the landscape begins to open, until walls give way to wider skies. The familiar order of the empire loosens here, replaced by a rhythm dictated by geography rather than decree. The roads are no longer paved, they are negotiated. Travelers move when they can, stop when they must, and learn quickly that patience is a survival skill, not a personality trait. There is a quiet humor in this stage of the Silk Road if you listen closely. For all the empire's careful planning, once silk leaves its controlled heartland, it becomes vulnerable to the very thing that makes it powerful: human hands. It will be folded poorly. It will be bargained over endlessly. It will sit forgotten in storage rooms while people argue about its worth. History rarely moves with the elegance its artifacts suggest. As night settles over the eastern edges of the Silk Road, the day's movement slows. Fires are lit. Guards relax their posture slightly. The clerk finishes his ledger and stretches his cramped fingers. Somewhere, silk rests under layers of cloth and trust, waiting for the next small step westward. You don't rush after it, not yet. You stay where you are for a moment, listening to the quiet efficiency of a system just beginning to stretch beyond itself, unaware of how far its threads will eventually reach. And as sleep begins to feel heavier, a gentle question lingers, barely louder than the wind against a wooden gate. If silk can travel this far without intention, what else might follow it? Unseen, unnoticed, and far more lasting. You don't notice the transition at first. There is no sign that says you have left one world and entered another. The change happens gradually, the way evening slides into night, without asking permission. The ground grows drier underfoot, the air carries fewer familiar smells, and the rules you relied on in the East loosen their grip. This is the long middle of the world, Central Asia, where the Silk Road stops feeling like a route and starts behaving like a conversation. Here, movement is not about speed, it is about timing. You learn quickly that nothing survives on enthusiasm alone. Caravans gather not when someone feels ready, but when enough people agree that the moment is tolerable. Camels kneel with the patience of creatures that have learned history the hard way. They do not rush. They wait, chewing thoughtfully, as if aware that this road rewards endurance far more than ambition. You enter an oasis city, one of many scattered across this wide middle space, each one a soft interruption in the land's indifference. From a distance it appears almost unreal, green clustered against brown, walls rising gently instead of defiantly. Inside, the air changes. There is water here, coaxed into channels and basins, turning scarcity into routine. The sound of it is surprisingly loud after days of wind and footfall, and people pause near it longer than necessary, pretending they have business while simply enjoying the reminder that the world can still be generous. This is where silk pauses. It does not glide smoothly through these places. It stops, waits, gets inspected, folded, unfolded, weighed by hands that know its worth without knowing its origin. Deals are made slowly, with more listening than speaking. No one trusts the first price. Everyone expects the second to be a lie. The third, negotiated over tea and silence, is usually close enough. A familiar figure returns here, though you may not recognize him at first. The clerk from the eastern border has become a trader's assistant, now older, a little less careful with his brush, a little more tolerant of dust on his sleeves. He squats near a caravanserai wall, counting bundles, his ledger resting on his knee. The ink dries too quickly in this air, forcing him to work faster than he prefers. He mutters about it under his breath, but keeps writing anyway. Systems adapt, or they stop functioning. People do the same. Caravanserais are not romantic places, despite what later centuries might imagine. They are practical, loud, crowded, and full of small irritations. Animals need tending, goods need guarding, people need space but rarely get it. And yet they work, because they offer something essential: safety through proximity. Alone, the road is indifferent. Together, it becomes survivable. You notice how few people here think of themselves as travelers. Most see themselves as locals who happen to move. A man from the west trades spices he did not grow. A woman from the north sells wool dyed in colours that do not exist in this landscape. They do not imagine the ends of the road. Their world is measured in the distance between one familiar stop and the next. The Silk Road thrives on this modesty. No one has to understand the whole for it to function. At night, the caravanserai settles into a layered quiet. Not silence, never silence, but a gentler noise. Animals shift their weight. Someone coughs. Someone laughs softly at a joke you don't quite catch. There is humour here, understated and necessary. When you live with uncertainty as a daily companion, you learn to make room for small amusements. Complaints about food, exaggerated stories about terrible weather, the shared understanding that tomorrow will be much like today, and that this is somehow comforting. Trade here is not only about objects. News moves as efficiently as silk, sometimes faster. Stories of distant rulers, strange customs, unfamiliar gods drift through the space, changing slightly with each telling. You hear the same tale twice and realize it has already evolved. The Silk Road is very good at this, turning certainty into variation without anyone noticing. What becomes clear as you linger in this middle world is that the Silk Road survives because it refuses to be centralized. There is no single authority here, no empire capable of controlling every step. Instead, there are agreements, habits, expectations. Trust is temporary but renewable. Suspicion is constant but rarely paralyzing. This balance, fragile as it seems, holds for centuries. As morning approaches, caravans prepare to move again. The clerk closes his ledger and ties it carefully, the way one does with things that matter but cannot be protected completely. He does not know where this silk will end up. He does not need to. His role is smaller and therefore sustainable. You watch as the caravan sets out, disappearing slowly into the open land, not dramatically, but inevitably. The Road does not pull them forward, it simply remains available. And as you begin to drift toward rest, another quiet curiosity settles in beside you, no heavier than a folded piece of cloth. If goods can travel this far and change so many hands, what happens when ideas begin to follow the same path, lighter still, and far harder to contain? By the time you follow the road a little farther, you begin to notice that the most important cargo no longer makes a sound when it's set down. Silk still moves, spices still change hands, animals still complain in their slow, expressive ways. But something else has joined them. Something that requires no pack animal and leaves no footprints. Ideas have learned how to travel light. You feel it first in conversation. At a caravanserai courtyard, a man pauses mid-sentence, searching for a word that doesn't quite exist in his language. He borrows one instead, testing its shape in his mouth. Nearby, someone listens with polite curiosity, nodding as if they understand more than they do. This is how belief moves here, not as proclamation but as suggestion. It drifts between cups of warm drink and the careful sharing of food, entering the world quietly, like a thought you don't remember choosing. Monks pass through these places with little to show for themselves besides calm, posture, and an unusual patience for dust. They carry manuscripts wrapped against the weather, but what they offer most often is not text. It's time. Time to explain. Time to repeat, time to listen without arguing. Their teachings are not always understood and rarely accepted all at once. Still, something stays behind after they leave, like a faint outline where furniture once stood. The Silk Road proves especially good at carrying such partial understandings. A concept begins in one place, travels westward or eastward, and arrives transformed. A ritual becomes a story becomes a habit. A habit, repeated often enough, begins to feel inevitable. You realize that this road does not preserve ideas so much as it adapts them, sanding away sharp edges until they fit the hands of whoever receives them. In one city, you watch a scribe at work, his lamp casting soft shadows across the wall as he copies a text brought from far away. The script is unfamiliar, the meaning still debated among those who can read it, but the act itself is deliberate. Each line is formed carefully, not out of certainty, but respect. He does not rush. He knows that accuracy matters, but so does legibility. Knowledge, like silk, must be usable to survive. The scribe pauses, often rubbing his eyes, adjusting the wick of his lamp. He mutters about the smoke, about the strain, about the strange responsibility of preserving words written by someone he will never meet. This is the quiet labor behind the Silk Road's reputation, a long chain of ordinary effort supporting extraordinary reach. Ideas also travel disguised as medicine, as practical advice, as small observations about the body and the stars. Someone mentions a remedy that worked back home. Someone else modifies it slightly, convinced the local climate demands a change. Astronomy passes through in similar fashion, softened by metaphor and memory. You hear someone describe the sky as a great wheel turning steadily, and while the image may differ from its original explanation, the understanding remains close enough to be useful. There is humor in this process, subtle but persistent. An idea arrives wrapped in authority, only to be misunderstood completely and applied anyway. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Either way, it becomes part of local experience. The Silk Road does not correct these errors, it absorbs them. History, you begin to suspect, is far more tolerant of approximation than modern textbooks would prefer. As you move farther along the road, you notice that ideas are rarely exchanged in isolation. They come bundled with gestures, tones, and assumptions that resist translation. A greeting means one thing here, another a few days' travel away. A prayer said with confidence in one place is whispered cautiously in another. And yet, people try. The attempt itself becomes a kind of shared ritual, binding strangers through effort rather than agreement. The familiar clerk appears again, now older still, his hair threaded with the quiet evidence of years. He listens as a traveller explains a belief unfamiliar to him, nodding slowly, asking questions that reveal curiosity rather than conviction. Later, he admits to you, though perhaps only in your imagination, that he does not know what to think about it, but he will remember it. And remembering on this road is often enough. Night deepens, and the caravanserai settles into its layered rest. Somewhere, a story is being told for the third time that evening, its details already shifting. Children drift closer, pretending not to listen. Adults pretend not to care. This is how ideas embed themselves, not through instruction, but proximity. By morning, some travellers will carry these thoughts onward, barely aware they're doing so. Others will leave them behind, satisfied with the trade of the moment. The Silk Road allows for both. It does not insist. It offers. As sleep begins to press more firmly now, you sense the road widening, accommodating not just goods and beliefs, but entire ways of seeing the world. And a soft curiosity follows you into rest, gentle as a half-remembered story. If ideas can move so freely across borders, what happens when empires, solid, confident, and proud, try to contain them? That question waits patiently ahead, already resting on the road, ready to be picked up when you are. You arrive at a city not by announcement but by relief. The land loosens its grip, the horizon gathers itself into walls and roofs, and the road exhales. These are the Silk Road cities, places that did not simply sit beside trade, but learned how to breathe with it. They expand when caravans arrive, contract when routes shift, and survive by listening carefully to forces they cannot command. Inside the gates, movement slows, not because there is less to do, but because everything here requires negotiation. Water must be shared, space must be measured. Languages overlap like shadows at noon, markets open early, not out of optimism, but habit. The same stalls appear in the same places, run by families who have learned that consistency is its own form of advertising. You walk through a bazaar where goods are arranged less by category than by story. Here, silk lies beside spices, which lie beside metalwork, each item carrying a whispered account of where it has been. The sellers know these stories well enough to improvise them, adjusting emphasis depending on who is listening. Truth is flexible here, but not careless. Reputation still matters. A lie that travels too far eventually finds its way back. A small human scene unfolds near a well. A mother lowers a bucket slowly, steadying it with one hand while her child watches, fascinated by the echo from below. She explains softly why the rope must be checked, why patience prevents spills. This is not a lesson about water. It is a lesson about cities. These places endure because they teach restraint as early as possible. Cities along the Silk Road become translators long before they become rulers. They learn how to host strangers without becoming them, how to borrow without dissolving. Architectural styles blend cautiously, an arch here, a courtyard there, adapted to local needs rather than copied whole. Even religion settles gently, layering itself over existing customs instead of replacing them outright. This is not tolerance born of idealism, it is tolerance born of survival. At dusk, city sounds change character. The market's sharpness softens, doors close, lamps flicker to life, each one a small decision against darkness. In a room above a shop, a scribe works again, this time copying contracts rather than philosophy. He measures words carefully, knowing that clarity prevents conflict. His ink smells faintly of soot and resin. His handwriting reveals fatigue, but also pride. Documents, like walls, are a city's quiet defenses. You notice how the Silk Road shapes time here. Days are punctuated by arrivals and departures. Seasons are marked not only by weather, but by which goods are expected. A bad year is not always a dry one. Sometimes it is simply a year when nothing arrives on schedule. Anxiety in these cities has a rhythm, and everyone knows it. There is humour here too, understated and resilient. Locals joke about travellers who insist on explaining the city to its own inhabitants. They laugh at exaggerated fears of the road, even as they respect them. Humour becomes a pressure valve, releasing tension without denying it. This too is a form of engineering. As night settles deeper, you sense how fragile this balance is. Cities rise because roots favour them. They decline when roots shift. Nothing here pretends to permanence. Even monuments are built with an understanding that maintenance matters more than grandeur. The Silk Road rewards adaptability, not arrogance. The familiar clerk passes through again, now barely recognizable as such. He owns a small room here, rents space when caravans arrive, and keeps his ledgers lighter than before. He has learned that cities do not belong to those who try to control them, but to those who pay attention. Tonight, he listens more than he speaks, watching shadows move across familiar walls. As you prepare to drift onward in your mind, another gentle thought settles beside you. Cities can host goods and ideas, but they also concentrate power. And power, unlike silk, does not always travel quietly. The road ahead begins to shimmer with larger ambitions, carried by banners instead of bundles. That realization rests softly with you now, like the last lamp extinguished before sleep. You sense the change before it announces itself. The road feels wider, more deliberate, as if someone has begun measuring it with authority rather than habit. Where once the Silk Road moved by mutual tolerance and improvisation, it now attracts attention from those who prefer straight lines, clear borders, and predictable returns. Empires have noticed the road, and like anyone encountering something valuable, they want to name it, count it, and make it behave. You begin to see markers of this interest everywhere. Guard posts appear at intervals that feel intentional rather than convenient. Officials ask questions that sound rehearsed, their curiosity sharpened by responsibility. Papers are inspected. Goods are weighed again, even when nothing has changed since the last city. The road has not altered its nature, but the way people look at it has. Empires, you realize, do not invent trade routes. They inherit them, often reluctantly, and then attempt to improve them into obedience. Taxes are introduced gently at first, explained as protection fees, contributions to safety, reasonable exchanges for stability. Sometimes they even work. A road with guards can feel safer than one without. A stamped document can ease passage more effectively than a smile, but every layer of control adds weight, and the Silk Road has always preferred to stay light. You pass through a region where banners hang at the city gate announcing who currently claims responsibility for order. The people inside treat them with polite respect, nothing more. Empires come and go here often enough that loyalty becomes conditional. The city adapts by learning to host power without trusting it too deeply. Walls are repaired, roads are maintained, and life continues carefully neutral. A small scene unfolds near a checkpoint. A builder, broad-shouldered, sun-marked, his hands permanently shaped by tools, waits patiently as an official inspects his cart. Inside are stones, ordinary and unremarkable, meant for repairs. The official squints, searching for something valuable to justify the delay. The builder does not hurry him. He has learned that patience is cheaper than protest. When the cart is finally waved through, the builder mutters a quiet joke about empires needing reassurance that stones are still stones. It earns a few tired smiles. Humor here is survival with a softer edge. Empires bring roads too, paved stretches, bridges, milestones carved with promises of longevity. These improvements are real and appreciated, but they also bring expectations. The road must now serve the center. Goods should flow inward. Information should travel upward. The Silk Road responds by complying just enough to be useful, while quietly continuing its sideways conversations. Ideas especially resist imperial management. A belief tolerated for trade reasons begins to attract followers. A philosophy copied for curiosity becomes persuasive. Authorities notice only after these ideas have already settled into daily life. Edicts are issued, boundaries are drawn. The road listens, nods, and continues doing what it has always done, moving around obstacles rather than confronting them. You observe how empires struggle with the road's lack of loyalty. It belongs to no capital. It does not end where borders say it should. When one power weakens, the road does not mourn. It simply reroutes. This frustrates planners who prefer permanence. But the Silk Road has never promised that. At night, in a city under imperial oversight, the atmosphere tightens slightly. Lamps burn lower. Conversations grow careful near public spaces, and yet, in private rooms, stories continue to circulate. A mother hums a tune learned from her own mother, shaped generations ago by distant influences she no longer names. A scribe copies a text that has survived multiple regimes, adjusting its margins to fit a new format while preserving its core. Continuity hides inside adaptation. The familiar clerk appears once more, now with a small seal of authority. Nothing impressive, but enough to grant him passage through the certain gates. He uses it sparingly. Power, he has learned, attracts attention. Attention invites expectation. He prefers to remain useful rather than important. Tonight, he closes his ledger early, aware that tomorrow's rules may differ slightly from today's. Empires eventually fade, as they always do, but they leave traces behind, roads that remain, laws that echo, cities reshaped by administrative needs. The Silk Road absorbs these remnants, folding them into its long memory without sentimentality. It does not reject empire, it outlasts it. As your thoughts slow now, you sense another quiet turn ahead. If empires cannot fully control the road, they will attempt something else. Movement of people, not just goods. Armies, migrants, entire populations drawn into motion. The road grows heavier with footsteps, and its stories deepen. That awareness settles gently with you, like a distant drum heard just before sleep, steady and unavoidable. The road grows heavier beneath your steps, though nothing about it looks different at first. The stones are the same, the dust familiar, the horizon still patient, and yet something has shifted. Movement along the Silk Road now carries weight beyond exchange. It carries urgency, purpose sharpened by fear. You can feel it in the pace of travelers, in the way conversations pause when uniforms appear, in how silence stretches a little longer than comfort allows. Armies begin to use the road not because it welcomes them, but because it already exists. Paths carved by merchants prove efficient for marching boots. Supply lines follow routes once traced by camels. The Silk Road does not resist. It has learned that resistance is loud and temporary. Instead, it bears witness. You pass groups moving not toward opportunity, but away from danger. Families travel with fewer possessions than expected, their bundles practical rather than valuable. They know what slows them down. Children walk quietly, coached into stillness by long days of uncertainty. These migrations are rarely recorded in official histories, but the road remembers them in worn edges and widened tracks. A small vignette unfolds near a river crossing. A mother kneels to adjust her child's shoe, tightening a strap made from repurposed cloth. Her movements are practiced, efficient. She speaks softly, explaining that tight shoes mean fewer stops. The child nods, serious beyond their years. There is no drama here, just adaptation. The road has always rewarded that. Conflict also carries something else, disease. Illness travels invisibly, unbothered by borders or intentions. Camps become crowded, water sources strain, remedies pass hand to hand, some helpful, some hopeful. People learn quickly which practices soothe and which merely distract. Knowledge spreads the same way fear does, quietly, person to person. Empires attempt to regulate this movement, issuing orders meant to restore clarity. Quarantines are declared. Checkpoints multiply, but the Silk Road has never been a single line. It branches, it loops, it finds alternate paths. Control remains partial, always a step behind necessity. There is a strange equality in this moment. On the road, rank softens. A soldier needs water just like a trader. A refugee rests beneath the same stars as an official. Shared vulnerability becomes a brief common language. It does not erase conflict, but it interrupts certainty. Even authority must sleep. You notice how humor survives even here, thin but persistent. Someone jokes that the road sees more marching than listening these days. Another remarks that illness respects no banners. The laughter that follows is brief but real. Humor, once again, releases pressure without denying reality. The builder appears again, older now, his posture slightly stooped. He repairs roads damaged by heavy use, filling cracks widened by wagons and boots. He works methodically, aware that his efforts serve everyone equally. Armies pass, refugees follow, merchants return when they can. The road must hold them all. He hums quietly as he works, a tune learned long ago, shaped by many places. It steadies his hands. At night, camps spread unevenly along the road. Fires burn low. Conversations are muted. People sleep in shifts, more alert than rested. The Silk Road does not offer safety, but it offers familiarity. Even in danger, knowing where you are provides a fragile comfort. You begin to understand that the road's greatest role during conflict is continuity. It reminds people that movement existed before this moment and will continue after. That knowledge does not end suffering, but it places it within a longer story. And long stories have a way of absorbing pain without letting it define everything. As calm returns gradually, unevenly, the road adjusts. Once more, armies withdraw or dissolve. Borders change shape. Some cities recover quickly, Others never fully do, but trade. Resumes not triumphantly, just practically. People rebuild because stopping entirely would mean something worse than loss. The clerk returns to view, now quieter, his records thinner. He has learned to write less during unstable times. Too much detail invites attention. He listens more than ever, noting shifts in tone rather than policy. Survival, he understands, is often about timing. As your thoughts slow again, you sense the road preparing for another transformation. After conflict comes reconstruction. After movement under pressure comes movement by choice. The Silk Road, patient as always, waits for curiosity to return. That anticipation settles gently beside you now, like the first calm breath after a long strain. Recovery does not arrive with ceremony. It seeps in quietly, almost apologetically, as if unsure it is welcome. You feel it first in the road's texture beneath your feet. The deep ruts left by hurried wagons begin to soften. Loose stones are nudged back into place. The path does not return to what it was, but it becomes usable again, which is often enough. Trade resumes the way breathing does after illness, shallow at first, then steadier. Caravans are smaller now, goods are chosen carefully. Silk still moves, but so do practical things. Grain, salt, simple tools. Luxury waits its turn. People have learned what matters when certainty is thin. You arrive at a city that bears scars without hiding them. Walls have been repaired unevenly. Some gates stand newer than others. Market stalls reappear in familiar patterns, though a few remain empty. Their absence quietly acknowledged. No one asks why. The Silk Road teaches communities to accept gaps as part of continuity. A micro scene unfolds near a grain stall. A farmer counts measures slowly, her fingers dusted with chaff. She trades with care, double-checking weight and quality, not from distrust, but habit, sharpened by loss. Her onions are smaller than in better years, but they are real, grown, dependable. She smiles briefly when the trade is fair. Recovery, here, is transactional and deeply human. You notice how rituals return first. Lamps are lit at consistent hours. Greetings regain their rhythm. Even jokes sound familiar again, though gentler. Humor no longer deflects danger. It reassures normalcy. Someone remarks that the road smells like trade again, not fear. The comment draws nods. Smell, after all, is memory's fastest messenger. Cities along the Silk Road begin to renegotiate their identities. Some grow bolder, welcoming diversity as a strength rather than a risk. Others tighten customs, cautious of change. Both approaches reflect lessons learned the hard way. The road accommodates them all, adjusting without commentary. Cultural exchange resumes alongside goods. Songs travel, recipes adapt. A tune hummed in one city acquires new words 2 stops away. Beliefs soften at the edges, shaped by conversation rather than decree. None of this happens quickly. It unfolds the way dawn does, unnoticed until suddenly present. The builder reappears, this time working alongside others rather than alone. Repairs become communal again. There is satisfaction in shared labor, even when resources are limited. Tools are passed hand to hand. Advice flows freely. Someone jokes that rebuilding is easier than waiting for permission. Laughter follows, easier now, less strained. You sense that the road itself participates in healing by offering familiarity. The same bends, the same distances between water sources. Predictability becomes comfort. Travelers begin planning beyond survival, thinking in terms of seasons rather than days. That shift matters more than any official declaration of peace. At night, you rest near a caravan heading west. Conversations linger longer around the fire, stories replace warnings. Someone describes a city rumored to be thriving again, its markets bright, its inns open late. The tale is met with cautious hope. Hope, you learn, travels best when not rushed. The clerk returns, his ledgers fuller now, though still modest. He records transactions with renewed confidence, aware that writing things down signals trust in continuity. He sharpens his pen carefully, savouring the small ritual. Tonight, his room smells of ink and warm bread. It is enough. As calm deepens, luxury edges back into the picture. Spices appear again, used sparingly but proudly. Silk regains its sheen, not as excess but as celebration. The Silk Road remembers that beauty has a role, especially after hardship. It does not apologize for this. You realize that recovery does not erase what came before. It incorporates it. The road is altered, but wiser. Communities remain. Alert, but not closed. Balance returns, imperfect and precious. As your thoughts drift further into rest, another gentle curiosity stirs. With stability restored, attention shifts once more, not just to trade, but to ideas that move quietly, shaping thought rather than markets. Philosophies, faiths, and questions begin to travel again, asking not what people can sell, but how they understand the world. That question settles beside you now, light and unhurried, ready for the next stretch of the journey. Ideas do not announce themselves the way caravans do. They arrive quietly, without bells or guards, often disguised as conversation. You notice this change not in the weight of packs or the number of animals on the road, but in the pauses between words, in questions that linger a little longer than answers. With recovery underway, the Silk Road turns once more to its most subtle cargo, thought. You sense it in the way travelers talk at rest stops now. Trade still matters, of course, but conversations drift easily beyond prices. Someone asks why a certain ritual is performed at dusk instead of dawn. Another wonders aloud whether the stars mean the same thing everywhere. These questions are not urgent. They do not need immediate resolution. That is precisely what allows them to move so far. The road is especially good at carrying uncertainty. Unlike goods, ideas are not diminished by sharing. They grow lighter, more adaptable, as they pass from mind to mind. A belief spoken aloud may change shape by the time it reaches the next city, but it rarely disappears. Instead, it learns how to survive by blending. You sit near a small group resting beneath a tree. A traveller speaks of a teaching learned far to the east, describing it carefully, aware that unfamiliar ideas require patience. He avoids certainty, offering the thought as a possibility rather than a demand. That restraint matters. On the Silk Road, force repels, but curiosity invites. Nearby, a listener responds with a story from their own tradition, finding parallels rather than differences. The exchange is gentle, exploratory. No one claims victory. The goal is not agreement, but understanding. Ideas, like travelers, rest better when not rushed. A familiar figure appears again, the scribe. Now older, his movements deliberate. He copies texts not as fixed monuments, but as living things. Margins grow wider. Notes accumulate. He knows that what he writes may be interpreted differently elsewhere, and he allows space for that. Precision matters, but flexibility keeps words alive. You realize that philosophies spread along the Silk Road not because they are perfect, but because they are adaptable. They answer questions people already carry. A belief that cannot bend will break under travel. Those that survive learn to listen. At a monastery-like compound, quiet, orderly, open, you observe travelers welcomed, not for what they carry, but for what they know. Questions are exchanged like gifts. Silence is respected. Meals are simple. Learning here is slow by design. The road respects that pace even as it continues onward. Humour survives in this realm too, softened but sharp. Someone jokes that every city insists its wisdom is universal, yet struggles to explain it to the next village. The laughter that follows is thoughtful rather than dismissive. Humour, again, smooths edges that might otherwise cut. Ideas also travel through art. Patterns repeat with variation. Motifs shift meaning. Across distance, a symbol carved into wood in one region appears painted on cloth in another, carrying echoes rather than instructions. Meaning accumulates rather than replaces. The farmer returns briefly, now listening more than speaking as others discuss crop cycles shaped by unfamiliar calendars. She considers what she hears, adopting what fits, discarding what does not. Knowledge, she understands, must work in the field to matter. At night, stories take precedence. Tales of distant sages, wandering teachers, and questions without answers circulate by firelight. These stories do not seek belief so much as reflection. They invite listeners to sit with uncertainty, a skill the Silk Road has quietly perfected. You sense that ideas move differently from goods because they require consent. No one can force understanding. This makes their journey slower, but longer lasting. An idea may take generations to settle, but once it does, it becomes part of daily life. As calm deepens, you notice how the road itself encourages this exchange. Its length demands patience. Its diversity discourages absolutes. Over time, travelers learn that certainty often says more about fear than truth. The builder appears only briefly now, listening to a discussion he does not join. He understands that not every contribution requires speech. Sometimes presence is enough. He returns to his work, humming, carrying the rhythm of many places within a single tune. As your thoughts slow, you realize that the Silk Road's greatest legacy may not be material at all. Goods wear out, cities fade, but ideas once shared gently persist quietly, shaping how people think long after the road itself changes course. That awareness settles with you now, calm and expansive. Ahead lies another shift. Not in ideas themselves, but in how memory holds them. Stories will begin to gather, blending fact and imagination, history and legend. And that gentle blur, inviting and familiar, waits just ahead. Memory does not travel the way goods do, and it does not behave like ideas either. It wanders, it lingers, it reshapes itself when no one is watching. As you continue along the Silk Road, you begin to notice that what people remember is no longer quite the same as what once happened, and yet it feels no less true. Stories now move ahead of caravans. You arrive in places already filled with echoes of elsewhere, tales that arrived long before the teller. A city is described as golden, even if its walls are chipped. A ruler is remembered as wise, even if his decrees were contradictory. Memory smooths edges, not out of dishonesty, but out of need. People remember what helps them live with what remains. You sit near a fire as a traveler recounts a story heard many journeys ago. Each retelling has added something small. A pause becomes a lesson. A detail becomes symbolic. No one interrupts to correct him. Accuracy is less important than meaning. Along the Silk Road, stories are not archives, they are companions. A familiar figure returns, the mother, now older, her voice steady, as she tells children why the road bends where it does. Her explanation blends geography with myth, practicality with wonder. She knows the truth well enough, but she also knows that stories must grow with their listeners. Tonight, the road becomes a living thing in her telling, patient and watchful. The children listen closely, comforted by the idea that something larger remembers them. You begin to see how myths take shape here, not through invention, but accumulation. A monk's teaching blends with a trader's observation. A traveler's dream merges with a historical event. Over time, boundaries soften. What matters is not what can be proven, but what can be carried. Humor sneaks in quietly. Someone remarks that every legend insists it happened exactly where the storyteller is standing. The group laughs, aware of the pattern. The Silk Road, it seems, has hosted more center of the world moments than any other place on Earth. The scribe appears again, wrestling gently with this tension. He copies a story he knows has multiple versions, choosing one not because it is correct, but because it is familiar. He leaves space in the margins, knowing another hand may add something later. Preservation, he has learned, does not mean freezing time. It means allowing change without losing essence. You realize that memory along the Silk Road is layered. Past and present coexist without urgency. A ruin is not a failure, but a reminder. A broken milestone still marks distance, even if no one knows who placed it there. Time here is not linear. It circles, overlaps, hums quietly. As night deepens, stories slow. Voices drop. Firelight flickers across faces shaped by many journeys. The road outside rests, holding every story ever told upon it without preference. It does not judge which are true. It understands that truth, in human terms, often arrives wrapped in metaphor. The builder passes once more, listening briefly before moving on. He smiles at a story he has heard differently elsewhere, amused by the variation. He understands that his own work will one day become part of such stories, simplified, embellished, remembered selectively. The thought does not trouble him. It comforts him. You sense that this stage of the journey is about continuity rather than accuracy. Memory keeps the road alive when physical traces fade. Without stories, the Silk Road would be a series of paths. With them, it becomes a shared inheritance. As your thoughts settle further into rest, a final shift approaches. Beyond memory lies quiet. Not forgetfulness, but acceptance. The road does not need to be explained anymore. It simply exists, folded gently into the world. That stillness waits ahead, unhurried, ready to bring the journey to rest. The Silk Road does not end with a sign or a final stone. It fades, it thins, it loosens its grip on geography and settles instead into habit, memory, and breath. As you walk the last stretch of this long listening, you realize that the road has been slowing for some time now, preparing you for this gentle unfastening. You feel it in the way movement softens. Fewer hooves pass at dawn. Fewer bargains are argued into the evening. The pauses between arrivals grow wider, and no one rushes to fill them. The road, once taught with purpose, has learned the dignity of stillness. You stop near a place that was once busy, now quiet. There are traces, worn thresholds, smoothed stones, but nothing insists on being explained. The silence here is not empty. It is full of all that has already passed through. The Silk Road rests the way a river rests at night, still moving beneath the surface, content to be unseen. A familiar figure returns for the last time, the farmer, older now, walking the edge of her field. She no longer looks toward the road as often, Her life has grown roots. She remembers what the road brought her, seeds that thrived, tools that lasted, ideas that softened her certainty. She nods once, a private gesture of gratitude, and turns back to the work that remains. The road does not mind being left behind, it understands cycles. You notice how the world has learned to absorb what the road carried. Foods once foreign are now ordinary. Words once strange are spoken without thought. Beliefs once debated have settled quietly into daily ritual. Nothing announces this inheritance. It simply becomes. There is humor even here, faint but present. Someone remarks that the Silk Road traveled farther after it stopped than it ever did while active. The thought lingers, oddly comforting. Influence, it seems, prefers understatement. The scribe appears briefly, setting down his final copy. He does not close the book. He leaves it open, knowing that stories meant to endure should always invite return. He extinguishes his lamp carefully, respectful of the dark. Not all endings require light. As night deepens, you feel the road withdraw from effort. It no longer needs to connect cities. It has connected people. It no longer needs to carry goods. It has carried time. What remains is not a path, but a pattern, a way of exchange that learned how to be human. You sit with this realization as your breathing slows. The Silk Road has taught patience by requiring it. It has taught humility by outlasting certainty. It has taught listening by refusing to speak loudly. These lessons do not announce themselves, they wait to be noticed. The builder's song drifts faintly from somewhere you cannot see. It is simple, repetitive, unfinished. That feels appropriate. The road never sought completion, only continuation. You understand now that rest is not an absence of motion, it is a change in direction. The Silk Road rests in the way memories surface without effort, in the way questions remain gentle, in the way people still gather to exchange more than they carry. As your thoughts settle, the past no longer presses forward. It stands beside you, quiet, companionable. You are not asked to remember everything, only enough to feel connected. And so the road releases you, not abruptly, but kindly. There is nothing left to follow, only a calm awareness that you have already arrived. You rest, knowing the road will keep watch, the way it always has, without asking, without needing credit, content to exist in the background of human lives.